So this morning I went to the Michael Kors store at Rockefeller Center in New York, and it was super cool. A gentleman named Julio, who I think might be the store manager, gave me a little impromptu tour, and he told me all about how it embodies the jet set lifestyle. So I want to talk all about it. Michael Kors is known for apparel and accessories that embody that modern jet set lifestyle. But what does that mean? And how do you use a physical space to evoke that lifestyle? Today, we're going to find out. We're talking with Kevin Vuong, SVP of Global Store and Workplace Experience at Capri Holdings. Live from New York, it's Where We Buy. That's right, you're listening to Where We Buy, the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. And as you heard, we're recording live from the 2026 Luxury Retail Leaders Summit at the Beekman in New York City. Kevin Vuong, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
This is super exciting. So, Michael Kors, I think everybody's familiar, but for the audience out there that may not be, Michael Kors straddles this area between accessibility and luxury. So tell us about that.
Well, Michael started his business in 1981 as solely a women's real runway apparel business. And it was quite small. We had one store on Madison Avenue, and then another one in Manhasset. But in 2003, the company changed and become what you know of it today. We created the Michael Kors line, which is what we call our lifestyle stores. And then we also started an outlet business. So it's 23 years now. And I think that's how, our core customers have always known us as a collection business, but all of our new customers that we've acquired now know us as a lifestyle brand, more aiming towards the accessible market.
So I was so lucky to get this impromptu tour of the store this morning. And Julio, who didn't know me from Adam, was just like, "Oh, you want a tour? Sure, great." And he used the term right off the bat that you used as well, which is jet set. So tell me more about that.
Well, jet set's been part of our DNA since the very beginning. And back in the early 2000s, I think we all defined jet set, or Michael envisioned jet set as coming off an airplane, coming off your private yacht. She was always going somewhere, but she never got there. And then, the world changed, and suddenly you have this new population of people coming up who are starting to, accrue some wealth. They want experience. We've been talking about experience all day, and I think, to be honest, we struggled for a few years to define what jet set means to the modern customer and what she or he aspires to. And I think today's audience, when we talk about the younger generation, Gen Z, and eventually Gen Alpha, they're not necessarily wanting that experience of a private jet, and they want to have something that is more of an experience that could relate to the thought of what their parents would think as luxury, which is getting on a private jet or a boat. So we've spent a lot of time trying to redefine and encapsulate, as you said, James, into a store what that feeling is. I think it's a work in progress for us. Just like a lot of the brands out there now, I don't think we've gotten there yet. What you saw in our new store concept today at Rock Center and how we are repositioning ourselves in the marketplace, we honestly just started about a year and a half ago. So it's still a work in progress, I would say.
One of the interesting things is there is a little cafe area in that store with two baristas. Mm-hmm. And I just come from a coffee meeting. Otherwise, I would have had another coffee. I didn't want my head to explode. But what's the thinking behind incorporating food and beverage into the store?
Well, surprisingly or not surprisingly, it's called the Jet Set Lounge. And, I think it's pretty common for brands now to figure out how to create more dwell time in their space. And I think, a cafe or some food and beverage component has always been proven to be successful. So we came up with the idea in June of last year the store at Rockefeller Center was already in construction. So you can imagine working in New York City, how difficult that could be to back into a food and beverage component when you're not that way in terms of permits and all the legal wranglings around it. But we really just wanted to create an environment where our customers would feel they had the opportunity to dwell. They may not be looking to buy something, but that they can just experience part of what we've created as this jet set lifestyle.
And you've got the Jet Set Lounge here. There's one in London. And then you were telling me there's a restaurant in Beijing?
Yeah, we just opened Beijing China World 2 weeks ago. And, you know, a lot of what happens, I think, in real estate or in leasing opportunities is it's like happy accidents. So we got this beautiful space, but part of the requirements was to create about an 80 square meter space that had a food and beverage component to it in the front of the store. So that's about 900 square feet. You can't just have a bar. So then we're like, okay, let's create a full cafe. And then we actually have a food and beverage director who works on staff for us. She created the menu. And it's the first Jet Set Lounge that we've created that is a selling model. Whereas at Rock Center and in London, we're actually giving the coffee away gratis. But Beijing will be our first selling model full-fledged cafe.
When you're thinking about food, and I should put in a plug here. So China World, that's where the JLL office is in that complex. So
perfect.
I need
to
come
go to the
with,
lounge.
I need to come up with a boondoggle to come visit everybody and have a breakfast or lunch at Michael Kors. Okay, you just won the best pop-up at the Windows Wear Awards for Galeries Lafayette activation. What did that entail? It's very cool.
Part of my role is also overseeing visual experience for Michael Kors, the brand, whereas I oversee store experience for both Jimmy Choo and Michael Kors. So as part of the visual experience team, we create anything that is out of house and in-house that is not architecture or store design. So any sort of pop-ups, seasonal animations, activations. We have been in this relationship with Galeries Lafayette now. I think it's coming on the 4th year, where every September going into Fashion Month, we get the central atrium space to activate with whatever we deem is the most important at this point in our brand's evolution. It's the second time we won the award. The first time we won it, we actually basically created the inside of a jet. That you can walk into. This year, we did a giant handbag with what feels and looked like you were entering into our hotel, which is part of what we're doing as part of our Jet Set DNA now, is creating what we're calling hotel stories. So every season, we're taking our customers to a different location, and she's getting there this time. She actually gets off the plane and she gets into the hotel and she can have an experience in the hotel. So we created this idea of like, you get a key, you go and shop, and we had a little cafe there. But it was a really great collaboration with our regional team. It's always a pretty heavy lift at the end because a lot of decisions have to be made with a lot of different stakeholders. But it was great. I think we were really honored to have had gotten the award.
That's fantastic. Was there any worry that you got too realistic with the hotel check-in desk and people thought it was really a hotel?
Not that I heard, but I think, we even had a piano bar, which was a little odd, but it was something that they wanted. I think this year we're going to definitely lean into the Jet Set Lounge because it really makes sense as part of the evolution of how we're bringing the lounge around the world. In fact, our Paris store is going to install a Jet Set Lounge around the same time.
You guys do a lot of pop-ups, right? Not necessarily in the U.S., but in other countries?
Yes. Mostly in Greater China for a number of reasons. One is marketing push for new product or seasonal animations, but really also we test the markets as well. We're now, I think we're now in China for almost 15, 16 years. So we're kind of saturated the market with first-tier cities, second-tier cities. So now we're testing tertiary markets, and instead of entering into a 2 or 3 year lease, we're getting spaces for like 3 months, 6 months, where we're really just testing to see if there's traction with the customer and product, and if it resonates with them. So we are doing a lot of them in Greater China specifically.
I was talking earlier about rising construction costs and tariffs. I'd be interested, well, I have a two-part question, but since you mentioned China, is that an issue in China? Are you running into rising construction costs and labor costs?
Not so much in China. In fact, I think Greater China is one of the regions where we're getting the best value for construction. We're not importing everything in terms of fixtures, and we make most of everything in Greater China. And labor costs are quite low still, so we're actually okay there.
It's just the rest of the world. It's a real
That's right.
mess. So how do you plan for this mess? I mean, things are changing every day. How do you plan for it?
I don't know, close our eyes and hope for the best. No, it's just within this, I think this calendar year, or like since we had the new administration, we've had to plan for 150% tariffs to 100% to 20% to 15%. What I think we've been really fortunate is developing relationships with our partners who we have had for over a decade, who are partnering with us to absorb some of those costs, knowing that they're ever changing. We've been pretty fortunate, but the costs are rising quite a lot in Europe and in North America for us.
So let's talk a little bit about the fleet of stores, renovations, openings, closings. Can you kind of give me the overall story behind that?
Sure. I think we're standing at close to 800 stores globally, both licensed stores and company-owned stores. Our goal is to get that number probably to about 600, which feels right to us. And we are planning to renovate about half of our fleet in the next 2 to 3 years. It's a lot of work for my team, but we're really excited. And, the results are really showing some green shoots for us. Just some data around, the renovated stores is that, all the KPIs are, positive. Traffic is up. We're getting more, sales per unit. It's just showing that when you create some place that looks and feels different and new, the customer really responds.
When you renovate a store, what is your personal favorite change? What's the thing that you're like, oh, this looks so much better now?
It's funny you ask, because it's not one thing physical in the store, but it's exactly what Julio did with you today. Because when you create a space where people feel good, their attitude completely changes. And we see that, because a lot of our fleet in North America, since this is our most mature business, they're aged, and I visit a lot of stores. And when I walk into a store that's 10 years old, that needs to be renovated, and then go to a store that was recently renovated, the attitude of the sales staff is completely different. And that is a domino effect of how well that store does, how much money it can make, whether we continue to invest in it. So the favorite part is just how people react to what the product is that we're putting out there.
That's fantastic. Something I'm personally very passionate about is promoting sustainability in everything that we do. That is often an afterthought in the retail world. How are you thinking about sustainability in your role?
I think we all struggle because of the rising construction costs. But I would say that as a company, our ethos is just to do our best. And some things happen organically as a result of needs of regional jurisdiction. So all of our stores in Europe are some form of LEED, gold, silver, or platinum, because the compliance continues to change in Europe and it's getting more and more strict. And then we're moving on to North America, because what we're finding is that if you're taking a look at LEED certification from the very beginning of the project, the costs are not that high. It's only when you're like knee deep into it that you're trying to back into it that this cost can be considerable. So from a store construction perspective, we're definitely invested in sustainability. I think where we have some work to do is on the visual experience piece. We do 4 animations a year for each season. And we're not at a place where, going from fall into holiday, from holiday into spring, we're recycling any of that. So we either give it away to the staff, but how many props do you need? Or it gets thrown away. So we have some work to do there.
When I was in college, I worked at a video store, and we would all take home all the old movie posters. And there's only so many really bad movie posters that one bedroom wall needs. Okay, so I want to pivot. Let's go inside baseball. Let's talk a little bit about organization. You were telling me that your team recently kind of had a bit of a change in branding and organization. Tell us about what happened.
Yeah, it was really with the visual merchandising team, which we rebranded as Visual Experience. And, I think old retail sees visual merchandising as people going in and fluffing the store and making it pretty once it's done and putting product on the wall. But that's not what the team does. What we do, we design everything that goes into the store to support the seasonal messaging and the product. And we are a tool for selling. We're not the back end or the end of the product life cycle. So we work very upfront with all of the merchants during market as they buy to make sure what they're buying really sings with what we can do from a capacity perspective. So when, there was an opportunity to rebrand, I immediately was like, we're doing more than just making things look pretty. We're actually affecting sales of the store. So it is an experience we're providing just through a visual lens.
What's the favorite thing in your job? What do you like most?
I mean, the creative part is really cool. Let's be honest. I also I like the people piece. I really do feel like, I'm on my 19th year at Michael Kors / Capri. And, I really like the store piece and going in and seeing how the mechanics work. When I was working as an architect in a firm, I did retail work. But you saw it only to a certain perspective because your contract ends at turnover and you're done. But I like to see what happens after we design the store and build it. Like, how does the product live? How do people interact? Like, what happens with the human experience with the environments that we've created?
So let's talk. You mentioned you were an architect. What was your journey to Michael Kors? You were an architect, and then what happened?
Well, I'm still an architect, unfortunately. I started working at Gensler many, many moons ago and just fell into the retail studio and just kind of fell in love with the pace of the work. It had the glamour and the cool and the creative of residential, but not the kind of lunatics of a residential. And it had the pace of workplace, but it had the glamour. And that's what I really loved about it. I say in 6 or 8, 9, you can make a mistake, but in 6 or 9 months, it goes away. And hopefully it's a mistake that people can live with or that you can fix.
So this is totally off topic from my show, but I have to ask, I don't have any residential experience. So what's the lunatics of residential?
Well, before I moved to New York, I worked in LA and we did a lot of work in Manhattan Beach, and you would have people who wouldn't make decisions for 6 months, but then you were suddenly held to their original schedule because they got a divorce or they went away, but when you have a lease and you have money to pay, people pay attention.
Yeah. Okay. Now I get it. Yeah. I get the kind of lunacy you're talking about. Yes. For sure. So you're in a much happier place now. So I'm going to ask one more question, and we're going to turn it over to you guys for questions. And I'm expecting some good questions out there, so get them locked and loaded. Outside of your stores, what's a favorite store or retail place or maybe even restaurant that you like to visit that maybe you find inspiring?
I mean, there's a lot. I mean... we all know the big guns. We all visit them and they're cool and whatever. But, I find a lot of inspiration in New York City. I mean, the city is, it's a cliche, but honestly, there's so much diversity. And you go to the Lower East Side and there's just coolness everywhere. It's oozing cool, And what I try to do with my work is... we all look at the same blogs. We're all looking at the same magazines. But when I have the time, I try to find something that stands out that's a little bit different but layer that into the lens of Michael Kors. And I do find a lot of inspiration in the grit and the noise.
This is the great debate. Is New York City the greatest retail city in the world? A lot of people say it's London. I've heard others say Shanghai. What do you have a take? Paris is another one I hear a lot.
I mean, I'm biased. I've lived here for 30 years. So what am I supposed to say?
Well, of course it is.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's great about New York, unlike the other cities that you mentioned, is that, good, bad, or indifferent, we're not beholden to the past. We are just ready to move on. And, I remember the first store that I worked on for Michael Kors when I joined the company. We took over a really famous deli on Prince Street called Jerry's. And at the time, people were like, oh my God, no one's going to come into your store. Blasphemy. You removed the wainscoting. 3 days later, no one even remembered Jerry was there. And that's the beauty of New York, is that we just love to move on to the next great thing.
That was the best New York story right there. Absolutely. Yeah, tabula rasa. No, what's Jerry? I don't even remember. Okay, we're going to open up for audience questions. So raise your hand if you've got a question.
Kevin, when you're renovating a store, do you close the store down, or are they phased renovations? And how do you handle if they are phased, how do you handle introducing the new finishes?
So we've done all the combinations, and it's all driven by what the retail team needs in terms of sales. So what we're doing now is, our biggest business is outlet. We make quite a lot of money in our outlet stores. So whenever we renovate an outlet store, we always get a temp. When we renovate our full price stores, depending on the market and what the sales volume is for that store, we could close the store, which is what we've been doing recently. We've phased larger stores when it makes sense, but even when we phase a renovation, the entire store gets renovated. We never do like a little bit of it, or only the walls or the floors. We renovate the whole thing.
All right, other questions?
You talked about having 800 stores and going down to 600, but how do you deal with localization to make that connection with the local community?
It's a good question, Tomomi. Thank you. I think we have a global standard, which we are, that's part of our DNA and that's part of our concept. But I think, with the localization, we really lean in on the more tier A, let's say, stores, because they're in prominent locations where it really makes sense. So in New York City, and when we open Shanghai and Taipei, it doesn't really happen in the architecture. We do it really with the visual props. So the props in New York are New York centric. The props in London, we actually hired a local artist and bought from their gallery. So I think because the props are easier to change out, it's more seasonal, we tend to do it as a layer up to the architecture. The architecture is usually just a backdrop for product anyway, so that's what we do. It's usually with the props.
Hi, Kevin. Is sustainability a part of your storytelling, or are customers responding to any of your sustainability strategies implementation?
It depends on the region. Unfortunately, in North America, in the US, because of everything else that's happening, I don't think people are that focused, and they're not as educated about sustainability. It's just a buzzword, I think, for most of us. I would say in Europe, it's a really great selling point for us, because, customers come in and not only looking at materials and what the store looks like, but they actually, when they go up to the bags and the shoes and the ready-to-wear, they're feeling the fabric and they're trying to understand the fabrication and where it came from. So that begins the conversation, right? It's really about product knowledge, but that could lead to like, hey, this is a LEED Gold store. What does that mean? And it does help us with the storytelling and really engaging the customer with something other than product.
Hi, Kevin. How do you see the evolution, the trend in terms of space allocation, men versus women in the stores, actually, and nowadays and in the future?
Are you asking me about our stores or stores in general?
Well, yours and in general as well.
There's definitely a men's business, but we're predominantly a women's business, and we're continuing to focus on that. I think we do that because there's so much opportunity, so much more diversity and variation. Our men's business continues to be quite small. We are allocating space for it in stores and online, but we are continuing to focus on strengthening the women's business, especially the apparel business, which we see as a huge, huge opportunity for us.
We're out of time. Kevin Vuong, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a fascinating conversation.
Thank you.
Special thanks to the organizers of today's summit here at the Beekman in New York. If you want to hear more interviews, audio retail tours, and new research insights, subscribe to Where We Buy on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or you can find us on the web at wherewebuy.show. One more round of applause. And that is a wrap.